I'm your host today, Bree Kelly, and I welcome you to contact myself or Janet Dorencott after the webinar to request additional information on our white paper, future webinars, software, and services. Our presenter today is Janet Dorencott. Janet has over 20 years of experience in information technology and co-founder at Relational Solutions. With that, I will turn it over to Janet and we will get started.
Thanks, Bree. So today we're going to cover very briefly the company background, but we're going to jump right into the data dilemma that exists at consumer goods manufacturers and understand what makes point of sale so difficult to work with. On top of that, at the end, we'll give you a follow-up on potentially what to do next. But we're going to go into a lot of detail on the issues related to point of sale data, because what we found is that a lot of customers who are looking for an enterprise solution to handle their point of sale data are having a difficult time justifying it to management and explaining why it's necessary. So we're going to focus on that today. And with that, I'll start with a little bit of background. A lot of you probably know who we are already, but we are a consulting company historically that specialized in data warehousing and business intelligence across all industries. We were very well known for our data integration expertise. We were the first company in the country to implement Informatica as well as DataStage, and those are data integration solutions. We also developed our own solution that would specifically tackle some of those additional problems that exist in the consumer goods manufacturing space, and that's our Blue Sky Integration Studio. We've built over 200 data warehouse implementations. We've done implementations for companies from Chase Manhattan Bank to Syndicated Industries and Smuckers and Glaxo, a variety of different CPG companies, as well as other industry companies. Most promising SAP solution provider, and we are certified on SAP, and we've also won several consumer goods technology awards pretty much every year for the past 8 years. So we've got a wide variety of expertise in this space and a lot of technology. So the data dilemma, what exists in consumer goods companies today is this dilemma where there's no shortage of data. Companies are getting data, and all of these different data sources are providing reports, and they can pull data and they can pull reports from these different sources. But an analyst inevitably has to do a lot of data manipulation to get that the different data sources to work together and to make sense in reports. Inevitably, even when reports are submitted to management, there's questions about those reports, and those questions come back to the analyst. And the reason there's questions about those reports is because typically one analyst will create a report a different way than another analyst will create their report. So management goes into meetings with very different result sets, and that's why reports and questions go back to the analysts, and then the analysts are stuck going back to all of their different sources to explain how they got that information. So there's a lot of manual manipulation going on, not just in creating the reports and gathering and trying to compile the information, but also in justifying where those reports and information came from. So why is there such a dilemma with integrating all of these different data sources? Well, first and foremost, every retailer provides different data elements. Where Walmart, they have their Retail Link portal that provides literally thousands of data elements. So many, in fact, that it's difficult to find the information that you really need for creating certain reports. On the other hand, you've got retailers like Dollar General, who only gives you sales units. Then you're also buying data, in most cases, from a third party, such as Nielsen or IRI or NPD. But, for example, you might get weekly data, and it's scrubbed to fit that syndicated data provider's algorithm. So in many cases, it's not the actual POS data, it's scrubbed to fit their algorithm. So it's actually summarized to a certain extent. Then trying to align data across the different retailers becomes very complex as well. And it requires a lot of manual data gathering from the different sources. And that's because not only are the data elements different, but the vernacular that they use when describing things are different. Aligning various data elements with reporting requirements can take days. We often see it take companies or individuals weeks, and sometimes they can't even do it at all because the information they're looking for, it just isn't, there's no easy way to align that information. On top of that, different retailers will start sending new data. For example, retailer X, this example says, oh, they just started sending us inventory on hand. Maybe another retailer starts sending you loyalty data. The bottom line is every retailer provides you with different data elements, and that's one complexity. Another complexity includes the reliability of the different data sources. So you'll see in many cases retailers sending data, or there's missing data, or maybe their portal is down. In other cases, they'll recast data from a month ago. And what I mean by recasting data is they might come back and say, hey, February's data was missing 2 hours from last Sunday. Well, what do you do with that? You have to recast that. Any reports that you've started creating in the meantime with the old data, you have to scrap. So it's not a complete solution when you're going to all of these different sources to pull together information, and the complexity is very great. On top of that, you might be getting EDI data from the different retailers. Well, EDI is supposed to be in a standard format, and that's just simply not the case. So without an EDI translator, you're constantly having to manipulate that data and make sense of that EDI data. On top of that, a very common thing is for the retailers to be padding UPC codes. They might pad them on the front end, they might pad them on the back end, they might do a combination of different things, they might just drop the extra digits. So there's a variety of ways that the retailers individually handle UPC codes, and all of that has to be manipulated based on that particular retailer. So an analyst can't just say, oh, here's the UPC code and all these retailers all pad it this way or that way. No, that's not the way it works. There has to be some sort of data manipulation to clean up those different UPC codes and make them more uniform. So if you do want to do any kind of cross-retailer reporting, it becomes very complicated in those cases. On top of that, you might have retailers that force you to go to third parties to get their data, whether it's Kroger with their Market 6 data, or CVS telling you to go to another third-party data source. It varies from retailer to retailer. So, and those different sources are also, again, have different reliability. So you may get EDI data very consistently on a daily basis. But when that data is missing some of the hours of a certain day, that data reliability becomes questionable. And the same thing with Walmart's Retail Link, for example. Retail Link, you can get access to it and download data on a regular basis throughout the day. It's not a problem. But what is a problem is what happens when Retail Link goes down and you were in the middle of downloading all of your different reports. So a lot of times it can be much more complicated than management really understands for CPG analysts. Yeah, and again, EDI data might come in late or might have missing data. The bottom line is the reliability of the different data sources varies from company to company and from source to source. The other thing is everybody wants to look at data differently. So you've got your different retail teams that have to look at the data according to the way that their retailer is looking at the data. So when Walmart has a different calendar than you do internally, somebody has to adjust those reports to reflect the Walmart terms. Now, a lot of people and most companies have some sort of individual tools to help develop their buyer reports for the different retail teams. A lot of times people will think, well, we've got that solved, we've got XYZ application, and that's producing all of our Walmart reports. Well, that's great, but we're only producing Walmart reports in those cases. That is not integrated with your internal master data, and it's not integrating it with your internal calendars so that you can do reporting based on your terms, and it's not integrated with the other retailer sales so that you can do high-level reports of what's selling at Walmart versus CVS versus Walgreens and so forth. The other thing is they've got multiple hierarchies. Every retailer has their own hierarchy and their own way of how they want to look at data. So they have to be able to drill down information into information based on the way that the buyer wants to see it, but you also want to be able to drill down the way that your own internal management wants to see it. And it's not just your internal managers, it's your own internal category teams, your own internal marketing teams. Your managers will want to look at those sales in your own geographies as well, for example. So you have different geography setups than your retailers have. Yet your sales manager is responsible for looking at revenue based on your internal geographies. not only for informational purposes, but also for doing things like calculating commissions for sales reps. The other thing is where you're going to get the data from. A lot of times people are getting 852 files. The EDI 852 has point of sale data in it. People are using and leveraging those retail portals, but a lot of times you have to buy that data. Are you going to buy your data from IRI or Nielsen? Do you need C-store information? Do you have to go to MSA for that data? Are you going to be buying weather trend information? Do you need demographic information from Spectra? Do you need distribution information from TD Links? Are you going to acquire a software that analyzes sentiment and integrate your social media chatter? There's all sorts of different sources of point of sale data out there, and every group within a company needs different information. But you have to get that point of sale data from someplace if you're going to leverage it. Otherwise, all you're doing is using your internal shipments or orders, and that data isn't necessarily reflective of what's actually selling. In fact, it's not reflective of what's selling. It's reflective of what you shipped. It doesn't reflect what actually scanned. Things can get lost in shipments, damaged, returns, there's shrink that occurs from theft and so forth. So using shipments and order data is not, it's something that's good to have, and it's good to have integrated with point of sale, but it's not the same thing as scan data. Then there's also constantly changing conditions. This is a huge problem for people who have developed any kind of automation with their point of sale data integration and report development. You are subject to any changes a retailer makes in the source system. You're subject to any changes that occur in the economy. You're subject to whatever your retailers decide to do in terms of merging with another company, or maybe your own company merges with another company, or maybe you spin off a division of your company, of your products. So these are all conditions that constantly change. But anytime that there's a change with one of these things, what happens if your company decides to go out and buy an Oracle manufacturing application? Well, you need to integrate your manufacturing. There may be some information from manufacturing that you want to integrate it with your point of sale data. And maybe you've already created some reports to do that. Well, you have to change the way that you're integrating that data once you've added a new source. And how do you want to handle that history then? Do you want to track it? Do you want to overwrite it? So all of these things are constantly changing the way an analyst looks at data. New laws. Maybe, HIPAA is a great example for companies that are in the tweener business. There's companies like Glaxo and Johnson & Johnson, and companies that sell products like diabetes supplies that are what we call tweeners, and those are products that are POS, but they also, you'd find them in the RX department, but typically they don't need a prescription to buy them. Well, what happens when a new law comes out like HIPAA with certain security requirements around it? Guaranteed there's going to be some data integration that was built and maybe some code that was written to integrate those different data sources that now need to be adjusted because of new laws that have come into play. And these are a lot of things that people don't think about that are just recipients of reports. A lot of times they may be used to seeing reports on a daily basis, and for whatever reason, there's a changing market condition, or a retailer spins off or sells 200 of their stores, but for whatever reason, now all of a sudden your report changes. Well, that report that they were regularly getting on a daily basis is no longer automated, because you have to go in and fix that and adjust those integration processes to align with what is currently existing. On top of that, you're subject to all the retailer decisions. So if a retailer has poor sales and decides to start focusing on a new category, for example, then you're subject to those changes, because there may be a different focus for them, and you want to be able to align what you're providing for them to that new focus. They might also change their portal. Right now we've got different retailers, major retailers, that are undergoing portal changes. Walmart is making some significant changes to Walmart's retail link. That's going to take some time, but once that change happens, it's going to be significant for everybody, because you're going to have to learn a new system, figure out where those different data sources are, and also bring that data together in some way that still makes sense for how you're currently looking at your reports and how your buyer wants to see those as well. Updated contract restrictions. We see this all the time. Walmart will make a decision that they're only going to do pay on scan, or they'll make a decision, another retailer will make a decision that you have to go to this data provider to get their point of sale data. Or they'll make a restriction that you can't have the data hosted. Okay, now you can have the data hosted. Okay, now you can have a third-party data provider host your data center. There's all sorts of different restrictions, and they change on a constant basis. At every retailer, there are attorneys, and those attorneys are always trying to justify their jobs. So those are always changing, and that changes the way that you're going to be looking at your data. Maybe they start sending you new information. There's all sorts of policy changes, or they open new stores, or they do acquire another retailer, or they simply start deciding to send data more readily. So no matter what decision a retailer makes, you're subject to those changes, and you have to make the decision to align your reports accordingly, and that all takes time. Every format's different. EDI is a different format than Oracle. That's a different format than SAP. All that data needs to be transformed into a common data type for it to be easily reported off of. That data exists in portals. You might be getting text files and all sorts of things. But when all these data sources are in different formats, somehow that data needs to be integrated into, still needs to be integrated into a common reporting solution that an end user could easily report off of. Frequency of data varies. So how do you handle that? How do you handle it when you only get data from your syndicated data provider on a monthly basis, but it's daily level detail, but it's got a different weekend date, for example? You've got some data that comes in every second of the day from your ERP systems. You've got other systems that are providing you data on a monthly basis or on a weekly basis. You might only get zip code changes on a quarterly or annual basis. You may get weather trend information from a third party on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. However your contract works with those individual data providers is how frequently you get that data. But on the other hand, you might get EDI data on a daily basis, and that shipment data that's in your ERP system is available whenever you want it. So trying to align the data when it's coming in with different frequencies is a complex process. And then you've always got the end user's requests that are changing. You're not only subject to the changes that the source system makes from the different retailers and your ERP internal data sources, but you're subject to the changes that the end users want. So if an end user suddenly wants to look at, okay, they're looking at out of stock, but now they want to look at the potential impact of that out of stock. How do you handle that? Well, you have to have a system in place that allows you to change business rules and enhance the data over time. And when they're constantly changing what they're requesting, you need a flexible architecture that will accommodate those changes and accommodate the new data sources that might be required for that. On top of that, we now have the added complexity of big data. So you have your internal data sources, which have your transaction and your ERP systems going. You've also got, in most cases, analytical systems with your CRM, your enterprise data warehouse, whatever business intelligence solutions you have internally for analysis. You've got your outside data sources coming in, like your point of sale data from EDI or your point of sale data from Nielsen or IRI or even your distributors. And on top of that, today we have unstructured data. You've got data coming in from the internet, from your e-commerce sites, from all sorts of different social media that you want to potentially integrate to see if it's having any impact on sales. All of this adds to the data complexity, and all of this is why it's necessary to have a platform that integrates data. But first and foremost, the main reason why companies have such a difficult time working with point-of-sale data is the lack of integration. So the whole idea behind this presentation is to help you explain to your management why an integrated repository is needed, why an integrated process, I shouldn't say a repository, ultimately it goes into a database which becomes the repository. But the whole process of gathering that data, cleansing it, aligning it, making sure that you apply the right business rules, cross-referencing that information, and then loading it into a structured format that's easy for the end users to query, that's what's going to be able to support your requirements down the road, not just for your category management teams, but for teams across your corporation so that they can leverage that point of sale data. And it's going to make it easier to manage long term. So by streamlining this integration process, these reports, the operational reports, still exist in many cases. But what we're doing is any reports and information that are regularly needed are then streamlined and integrated into a common database where end users can easily query that information, present reports back to management, and provide better insights and more productive meetings. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Bree, and we'll ask you to join us. We're going to have a follow-up presentation on POS Mart, and I'll turn it over to Bree to explain more.
Perfect. We'd like to thank everyone for your time today and invite you to follow our Relational Solutions blog by going to our website at relationalsolutions.com. We regularly post updates and industry information on LinkedIn under the Demand Signal Repository Institute. Today's presentation will be posted on our Relational Solutions YouTube channel, and we'd like to ask you to stay connected by following us on Twitter and Facebook, and you can see the contact information up on the screen. You're also welcome to email myself or Janet with your comments, questions, or feedback. And again, we'd like to hear your data story, so if you could tweet to us at #What'sYourStory.